Evening, ladies, gentlemen, staff, boys and girls. Before we start, let me start with a simple image. A teenage boy lying flat on a cold floor in his dorm room, staring at the ceiling, phone in his hands, scrolling. Well, that boy was me. And at that moment, I thought leadership could only happen on a stage. I thought growth can only be counted when people could see. But later, I will learn that the most important growth often happens off stage, and it usually starts on the floor at rock bottom. The biggest change in my life didn't come from winning anything significant. It came from almost losing everything I ever wanted. Last year, during term 3 of my school entered a familiar phase where Year 12 students sit their HSC examinations. Thus, Year 11 students have the chance and opportunity to step up and fill in leadership roles. It was a season of opportunity, a season where names are announced, badges are handed out, and future seems to take shape. I wanted to be part of that future, so I signed up for everything: school monitorship, boarding house leadership, trialing for both the first and second team for basketball, and aiming to become a cadet under officer in our school's cadet corps program. I told myself, if I tried hard enough, something has to work out. But when the announcements came, nothing did. One by one, my name didn't appear. Meanwhile, my closest friends succeeded. One became a boarding house vice captain, another joined the school's executive team, and another became a school vice captain. I clapped for them, I congratulated them, and then I walked back to my dorm room. I didn't sit on my bed, I was laying down on the floor. The tiles were cold through my uniform, and the room was quiet, except for the low hum of the air conditioner. I scrolled for hours, and by the time I stopped, my phone was at a measly 8%. The sunlight had moved out of my room, and I was lying there in darkness. And somehow that felt exactly right. I wasn't crying, I wasn't angry. It was just empty. Rejection hurts, but multiple rejections at once, that does something different. It makes you question your worth. It makes you wonder if effort even matters. It hurts watching people around you grow, especially when you're genuinely happy for them. But you just can't stop asking, why not me? I feel like I wasn't part of a main story. I feel like I was a backstage in a theater show, moving props, adjusting lights, supporting the show, while everyone else stood under the spotlight. I was still contributing, but no one was clapping. Emotionally, that was the lowest point of my life. My turning point didn't come from some sort of self reflection, it came from a simple knock on my door. The day the announcements came out, my friend Yule, who lived next door to me, came over. It was early evening. Dinner had just finished. The corridor outside was unusually quiet. He came into my room. We didn't sit side by side like in a movie. We sat on the ground on my bed. At first, we chatted. We talked about life, school life, about cadets, about our basketball team, and how unfair the timetable felt. Just normal teenage stuff. Then he asked me, "Are you actually all right?" I remember staring at the floor for a few seconds before answering. Then I said something I hadn't said out loud yet. I feel like I tried everything, but my efforts, they just don't reflect. That was it. I didn't give a speech. I didn't receive magic advice that magically fixed all of my problems. Yul didn't tell me to stay positive. He didn't try to solve my problems. He just listened. And that silence, it did something. For the first time, I wasn't explaining myself. I was being understood. In a boys' school, we usually communicate through jokes, competition, or straight up silence. If something hurts, you laugh it off. You keep it to yourself. If you fail, you move on. A pride and masculinity of an individual might be the single most important thing for a student like me. Therefore, sitting there, talking, saying things we normally wouldn't, felt extremely uncomfortable, almost wrong. Time felt stretched. No one checked their phones. No one tried to escape the moment. And for the first time, I realized something simple but powerful. Human connection don't always need solution. Sometimes it just needs presence. Looking back on it, that conversation didn't change my situation. I still don't have a title to my name, and the announcements were still final. But it changed something more important. In psychology, drawing back on Aaron Beck's cognitive behavioral therapy, this is called cognitive reframing. That the idea of emotional recovery doesn't begin when circumstances improve, but when we change how we interpret what those circumstances mean. A simple way to remember this is through the 3 C's. Firstly, catch the negative thoughts. Secondly, challenge whether it's true or is helpful. And finally, change, make it into a more balanced perspective. For example, catch, I wasn't chosen, I failed. Challenge, does one setback really define my ability? And finally, change, this is only a feedback, not a final judgment. And this doesn't only apply to leadership roles, it applies to exams, relationships, careers, moments when life doesn't go the way you plan, when God tests your limits. That night, I realized something. Maybe I wasn't being rejected as a person. Maybe I was just being redirected. And once that meaning changed, things started slowly to go well. I began noticing things that I hadn't valued before. Though I didn't make the first or second basketball team in my school, I stepped up in the thirds. I became a player that my team can rely on. Though I didn't get a house leadership role or become a school monitor, but that meant skipping countless compulsory meetings, hours that I reclaimed to myself and used internally. Further, thinking on it, leaders are the people serving us. So, just putting it out there. Further, though I didn't become a cadet under officer, I became a sergeant, leading a small group of 3 in our platoon. Less control, but more connection. Outside of school, I even started learning about investing with all the time that I picked up, quietly, independently. I made mistakes, I learned, and eventually I made progress. No applause, no certificates, just growth. Slowly, I understood something important. Not all growth happens on a stage. Recovery for me didn't happen all at once. It followed a 3-step program that anyone could use. Firstly, connection. I didn't struggle alone. I had my friend Yul. Secondly, reframing. I stopped seeing rejection as a verdict and start seeing it as a direction. And thirdly, growth. Not loud, not visible, but real. I learned to let failure be real. I learned to move out of my comfort zone, and I learned that strength doesn't always need to look like standing tall sometimes. It just looks like sitting still. My highest point didn't come from when I achieved something. It's when I understood something. That I don't need a title to lead. That I don't need applause to grow. That sometimes The moment that feels like setbacks are quietly innovations to slow down, to reflect, and to become stronger. So here's my innovation to you. If you ever find yourself on the floor, rejected, overlooked, and just questioning your worth, similar to me, don't rush to get up. Pause. Look beyond the ceiling. Reframe the view. Because the stage isn't the only place where life happens. From one of my favorite Netflix TV show, Stranger Things, without spoilers obviously, Hopper dropped one of his iconic lines in the season finale. The way I see it, you got two roads ahead of you. You got the one road where you keep going, blaming yourself for what happened. You keep going over it with your head, what you could have done differently. You push people away and you suffer because that's what you think you deserve. And then there's another road when you find a way to accept what happened. Doesn't mean you have to like it. You just accept it and live the best goddamn life you can. I spent a long time thinking the cold floor is where my story ended. And now I realize it was only a beginning of a new chapter. And if you're there right now, trust this. Growth is still happening, even when no one's watching, even at your lowest point. Though I didn't get to stand tall, stand in front of my school, and address my mates, but today I'm standing here, and that's enough. Thank you for listening.